wouldn't even called it this at the time, reflect upon and say, well, so how do I see black people? How do I see people who are homosexual? And you're talking about 1976, so it's got back quite a few years. You've been reared Catholic and rural, and there's sort of level of understanding, sexuality or other things, or communism or whatever else. So it was, but that question sort of then came up, like, why, or you were now suspect of anything you'd ever been sort of told, So thankfully there was that desire to question things. So whenever I read Paulo Freire's, and part of me was saying, but it wouldn't work here, at least there was another part saying, well, why would it not? Mm-hmm. And that's what we ended up developing in the jail, largely, that approach. But the real, I suppose, was a moral pressure for people to get involved, but not to the point where, it's compulsory. Education wasn't compulsory. Getting away from lectures about things to more about talking about things. Yeah. And then it was almost by accident we ended up with, around about 87, 88, we got another guy, again, we happened to be on hunger strike. He was writing to a woman in Sheffield in England, and she was in a poetry workshop, and she sent him a wee small basic pamphlet, a few pages stapled together, of exercises that they were doing, and we started more as a pastime on a winter night to can't go out to the yard or slot, whatever else, and it just unleashed the sort of creativity around the place, and people really into it, and then we did. Myself and Brian Brian, who became the editor of the Capital Voice, actually typed up. We were at that time allowed typewriters. Everybody else was to run them out because of getting computers, and outside so the jail was getting typewriters. Wow. We didn't have them before. So we typed it up, and again, the really important thing, because our attitude was, if you get something handwritten, it's maybe okay, but if you actually type it, it looks different. Yeah. You put a cover on it, colour cover, whatever else, suddenly takes on significance. Now, the words are the exact same.
Yes, no, but it makes a huge difference.
Huge difference, so it's just the appearance. So it became, that's what we typed it up, sent it around the block, did so many copies. And then that really encouraged others, and it was out of that, then we started the magazine. So then I wrote to a company in Galway, who are now publishing the book I just did before Christmas. It's called Salmon Poetry. They just set up a few years earlier. We're just saying, let's see what someone outside thinks about our poetry. Yeah. So wrote out and put some of this to the woman who was in charge of it, Jessie Lendenny, who's still in charge of it. And she put me in touch with this poet who was just emerging at that time, Rita Ann Higgins. Mm-hmm. There was a woman who ended up in hospital for about a year with tuberculosis. Uh-huh. She was semi-literate when she was in the hospital, and because people brought her in books, she actually started to become literate, and she took a real liking for poetry and got out and started writing poetry, and writes this amazing, it's a really working class, I don't say that in a derogatory way, but the issues that people on the ground are facing, her, she just has a great way of getting words against the administration, against oppressive regimes of whatever nature, just a really insightful look, and just published a lot of books since then. So that was like the start of encouraging. I published some of our poetry on the outside, which I think then encouraged us to continue writing, and then it was only in recent years I decided, because I still continued outside, but I didn't see myself as writing as a poet as such, but it was something that I like to do at times, and certain things happened that I like to, since almost document it that way, so I set her off the collection, and thankfully it was published just before Christmas.
And this is the collection, Threads.
Collection called Threads, yeah, and half of them are in the jail and half of them outside, and part of Threads, because at the same time as I was doing that, I started a project a couple of years ago in 2016, because that was the 40th anniversary of the whole prison protest beginning, 1976. And I want to do something artistically about it rather than just writing something about it. And in the meantime, I had got an original blanket from the jail. Once the jail closed, released all the prison. There was ones going in who were doing wasn't construction work, but actually removing all the stuff. And anyway, they took a blanket, they got a blanket and they came and they said, I don't know, you might want this, and they gave me an original blanket from the jail. Jesus. So I'd always had it in my attic, like, what do you do with a blanket? And then I thought what I wanted to do was or what I did was give it to a dressmaker and asked her to make certain clothes for me, like a waistcoat and scarf and a bow tie, and particularly a bow tie because it strikes you as very formal, and to take a jacket that I had and do the lapels with part of this blanket and pockets not there. And then I would photograph people who had been on the protest and been on a hunger strike, including the women in Armagh prison, and some of the women on the outside who had protested. Armagh, because women protested on the outside, mothers and all the rest of it, wearing only a blanket, like they didn't wear clothes on it, they wore only a blanket. So that was
Outside
totally authentic.
protesting?
Yeah.
Wow.
There's a woman, particularly Mary Nealis, her 2 sons were on the blanket, and in 1970, shortly after the protest had started, there was this whole, again, come back to the media, there's a whole drive around what was called the Peace People.
Okay.
There's no politics, just wanted peace. It doesn't matter about the issues. They were invited down to Derry to the cathedral in Derry, where you were down. Invited by the bishop, who was a friend of Mary's. And Mary would have been more at that time a nationalist rather than Republican. And she was outraged that these people had been invited, but what about her sons in jail? So she went down, that's for the moment, wrapped in a blanket, stood outside the cathedral with an other young woman whose husband was next door to me at that time in the jail, and she was just married, she was 18, Kathleen McCann, and they stood with blankets, and I interviewed Mary last year for a project, and said, we only had the blankets, we had nothing else because we wanted to be like the men in the jail. And she was saying about parishioners coming out and poking her with umbrellas and all, outraged.
Oh, wow.
How dare she embarrass the bishop? Her own mother didn't speak to her, she says, for about 3 weeks
Wow.
after. And she fell out with the bishop who was the bishop in Derry at Bloody Sunday. You see him holding the white.
Oh, wow.
Eddie Daly.
Wow.
We did a lot of other good work, but
Yeah.
they never spoke after them. And there's a photograph taken, thankfully, at that time, which has become an iconic photograph of Maria. And then they're talking, and she tells you, and the funny things, they're away around the country doing the various talks, and a lot of times they'd be doing talks outside Mass on a Sunday. And she says, so we're up in this truck, like an ordinary lorry, just on up to do the talking. And she said, you're there and you're talking and you're holding the blanket around you and all the rest of it. And they'd finished talking and there's a crowd around and they're clapping and all. And then she says, we'll have to get down off the top of the lorry. And she says, it's pretty difficult. You've blankets all around you.
Right.
So, there's one side, come on ahead and I'll give you a lift. And she said, there's this woman in front of hers. And Mary is a great community worker, and she was a Sinn Féin activist for years and an elected representative. And she said, forget who the woman was, Margaret or something, goes a step forward, and she's trying to step down to someone, the woman behind has a foot on the blanket.
Oh,
so
no.
she says, woman gets down, the blanket comes off, and I says, there's obviously this big farmer from Mayo who thought, I've died and gone to heaven. Because he had said there, jump on down, I'll get you here.
Oh my God.
So it's funny how people, in the midst of all of that, there have the crack about it. So it was, I don't know how I got on that there, but so the idea was to subvert the image of that period,
Yes.
which was all about long hair and beards and shit on the walls and all the rest of it. Now it was people who are happy to say, yeah, we wore the blanket. We don't walk about today with a blanket on us, but we would walk in, and there was at the time I was doing it, there was this project in Ireland called National Treasures, which was organised by RTE, which is the National Radio and Television Station in the South. They were doing it in conjunction with the National Museum of Ireland. So what they wanted to do was to go into different parts, Belfast, Dublin, Cork and Galway, and ask people to bring in items that or some sort of historical or social significance that would become part of this National Treasures. And Paula McFetridge, who's the artistic director I work with at the Boys Theatre, she says, when you take in your items on it? I was sort of half and half. Anyway, so I went down to the Titanic Quarter, which is where they're having it here in Belfast. This big thing about Titanic ship and all that. It's a big visitor centre, and this is where they're having it. And I was sitting in it, so I walked in wearing it, and I had the waistcoat on and the bow tie and all that. So I thought it was easy wearing the scarf, and I walked in, and it was amazing because they were all over it then, and the RT wanted to film it. They'd already heard about this project of what was going on. But what was really moving for me, because I said I made a calendar with the photographs, and I explained like what I was trying to do, and I said I wanted elegant photographs. And elegant wouldn't be a word you use in it every day sort of thing, you know. So I was sitting at one point, and I was waiting on to be filmed for the TV. And this woman, probably about 70, she was standing across. I seen her looking at me, and then she came across, and I was sitting in a chair, and she was foreign, but she'd lived here she was like from Sweden or Norway, that sort of thing. But she had lived here for 30, 40 years. She says,